In the heart of a civilization celebrated for philosophy, art, and democracy, there thrived a darkness too easily forgotten. Ancient Greece, the cradle of logic and reason, hid behind marble temples a world of depravity where human suffering was ritualized and pleasure often meant pain. You've heard of their gods, their heroes, their poets. But few dare to speak of what truly happened behind closed doors, the most horrific sexual practices that shaped the underbelly of Greek society. Imagine a festival not of joy, but of blood. A ceremony where women were stripped, beaten, and offered to men as part of a sacred ritual to honor Dionysus. Or consider the philosopher who preached virtue by day and by night paid to watch a girl's spirit broken for sport. These weren't isolated cruelties. They were customs, traditions woven into the moral fabric of the ancient world. Sex wasn't intimacy, it was domination, a weapon of hierarchy, of ownership, of control. And the line between ritual and brutality blurred until both became the same. Before Athens built its legacy on marble and myth, it built its pleasure on the bodies of those who couldn't say no. Stay with me. What follows will reveal the disturbing truths that history books quietly erase. Acts so normalized in their time that even the gods were said to demand them. In the busy marketplaces of Athens, beneath the calls of traders and the rhythm of daily life, another side of the city quietly operated. One that revealed the deep social divides of the ancient world. It wasn't hidden. It was accepted, taxed, and even regarded as a normal part of the economy. Certain houses offered companionship and entertainment, serving citizens from every background. Inside these places, people who had lost their freedom were treated as property, their lives controlled by those in power. Many of these individuals were enslaved workers, often brought from foreign lands or sold by struggling families. Their living spaces were small and crowded, with little privacy or comfort. The income they generated enriched business owners, whose taxes supported the same civic projects that built Athens' temples and theaters. Athenian law offered no protection for those trapped in such conditions. Children and adults alike could be forced into labor without choice. Marks of ownership were sometimes applied to show who they belonged to, a permanent reminder that they had no independence. When newcomers arrived, they were introduced to the system through strict rules and public scrutiny. Defiance was not tolerated, and those who resisted could face severe discipline or social isolation. Over time, many accepted their circumstances as unchangeable, their stories fading into the background of a city that celebrated wisdom and freedom for some, but denied it to others. As Athens rose in art, philosophy, and democracy, this darker foundation remained largely ignored. The same city that praised ideals of justice quietly benefited from a system built on control and inequality. Religion in ancient Greece played a powerful role in shaping public life, influencing everything from art and education to morality and daily customs. Yet, within many of these rituals, there existed a quiet contradiction. Acts carried out in the name of faith often reinforced the same inequalities that governed society. During large public celebrations, such as festivals honoring Dionysus or Aphrodite, the boundaries between devotion and indulgence blurred. These events were meant to express joy, fertility, and freedom, but for those at the bottom of society, participation usually meant exploitation. While citizens celebrated with music, wine, and theater, enslaved workers were often expected to serve and entertain, their labor fueling the grandeur of these festivities without any recognition of their humanity. Ancient writings reveal that such events were framed as sacred and joyous, yet the people providing the entertainment rarely shared in that joy. The rituals symbolized abundance and renewal, but for many, they became reminders of subservience and loss of agency. Philosophers and poets described these gatherings as vital to civic unity, but behind the words of harmony lay a structure that depended on the suffering of others remaining invisible. The contrast was striking. a society that preached balance, virtue, and moderation, often celebrated excess without question. In theaters, playwrights mocked or exaggerated the struggles of the powerless, turning hardship into spectacle. Crowds laughed at characters based on servants or marginalized women, treating their pain as entertainment rather than tragedy. Even in art, the theme repeated itself. Paintings and pottery celebrated beauty and perfection, but they rarely acknowledged the people whose unseen labor made that world possible. The stories of those without freedom remained unspoken, their lives reduced to symbols in service of greater myths. To understand how such inequality endured, we must look at how Athens explained it to itself. The city prided itself on its democracy, yet that democracy had clear limits. Only adult male citizens could vote or speak in the assembly. Women, enslaved people, and foreigners, together forming the majority of the population, had no political voice at all. Philosophers often defended this structure as natural. Thinkers like Aristotle argued that society functioned best when each person accepted the role assigned to them. In his writings, he claimed that some people were born to rule, while others were born to serve. These ideas, framed as logic, gave moral cover to a system built on inequality. It allowed educated citizens to see injustice not as cruelty, but as order. The law reinforced these beliefs. Enslaved individuals were legally considered property, meaning their experiences or testimonies carried little weight in court. Even free women were heavily restricted. They could not own significant property, vote, or represent themselves in legal disputes. Everything about Athenian life, from inheritance to marriage contracts, was written to preserve male authority. Economically, this arrangement proved profitable. Wealthy families gained both labor and social prestige, while the state collected taxes from industries that depended on servitude. The system fed itself. Privilege created profit. Profit reinforced privilege. Culturally, Athens used art and theater to celebrate freedom, reason, and human excellence. Yet the freedom being praised belonged to a small fraction of society. The public monuments, the grand statues, and the philosophical schools all stood as symbols of progress, but they rested on the unseen work of those who had none. The contradiction became part of the city's identity, a civilization that could build democracy and deny it in the same breath. As Athens grew wealthier, its contradictions deepened. The same city that spoke passionately about justice also allowed entire groups of people to live without rights. The same poets who wrote about love and beauty ignored the suffering that surrounded them. Over time, this imbalance began to erode the city's foundations, not only politically, but spiritually. The Athenian economy depended on maintaining a vast underclass. Every festival, every public project, every monument relied on people who had no freedom of their own. Yet the ruling class rarely questioned the system, believing it to be part of nature's order. When internal conflict and war weakened the city, the injustices at its core became impossible to ignore. During the Peloponnesian War, Athens faced major losses. Citizens who once enjoyed wealth and comfort found themselves living with scarcity. The moral arguments that once justified inequality suddenly seemed hollow when survival was threatened. Historians from the time described how corruption spread, how trust faded, and how ordinary Athenians began to lose faith in the ideals that once defined them. Even after the war, the social order remained unchanged. Laws that limited freedom for women and servants continued. The city's philosophers still debated ethics, while the system around them remained unjust. Athens continued to present itself as the symbol of reason and democracy, but beneath its polished image lay the memory of voices that had never been heard. Centuries later, as scholars and travelers studied ancient Greece, they praised its art and philosophy, but often overlooked its moral blind spots. The temples and sculptures survived. The names of the voiceless did not. Only fragments, small inscriptions, Pieces of pottery, a few lines in forgotten manuscripts, hint at the lives erased from the official story. The greatness of Athens, in many ways, was built upon silence. Centuries after Athens fell, historians and archaeologists began piecing together the fragments of everyday life that classical authors ignored. The discoveries challenged the long-standing image of Greece as a land of pure philosophy and beauty. What emerged instead was a complex civilization, one capable of greatness but also deeply flawed. The evidence uncovered from ancient homes, workshops, and public spaces revealed how ordinary people lived and struggled. Inscriptions showed that many sought small freedoms within an unbalanced system. Modest savings, letters to loved ones, or offerings left quietly at local shrines. These glimpses told a different story from the one found in textbooks, a story of endurance, not perfection. Modern researchers now view Athenian society through a wider lens. They see that its achievements in art, law, and science were inseparable from its contradictions. The same democracy that inspired revolutions around the world also excluded most of its residents. Recognizing this duality doesn't erase Athens' greatness. It makes it human. Philosophers of later centuries, from the Renaissance onward, began re-examining Greek ideals. They admired its pursuit of knowledge but also questioned its blind spots. Thinkers asked how a culture that invented the concept of equality before the law could deny that equality to so many. Those questions reshaped the modern understanding of justice, rights, and the meaning of civilization itself. Today, when people study ancient Greece, they no longer see a flawless golden age. Instead, they see a mirror, a reflection of both humanity's capacity for brilliance and its tendency toward hypocrisy. The story of Athens reminds us that progress without empathy is fragile, and that freedom means little when it isn't shared by all. The ruins of Athens still stand today, its marble pillars, weathered statues, and broken amphitheaters, reminding us of both its triumphs and its contradictions. Tourists walk the same paths where philosophers once taught about wisdom and virtue, rarely aware of the silent stories buried beneath the stones. Each fragment of pottery, each forgotten inscription, carries the trace of a life that history once overlooked. For many scholars, the legacy of ancient Greece is a lesson in balance. It shows that even the most celebrated societies are built on human choices, some noble, others unjust. The ideals of freedom, equality, and beauty that emerged from Athens were not perfect gifts. They were ideas still in progress, shaped by time, conflict, and reflection. Recognizing the hidden sides of history does not destroy its greatness, it completes it. To truly understand a civilization, one must look not only at its temples and heroes, but also at the people whose stories were never told. Only then can the full picture of humanity emerge. Today, historians and educators continue to re-examine the classical world, searching for the lost voices of the ordinary and the oppressed. Their work reminds us that history is not a single narrative. It is a tapestry woven from countless experiences, many of which have only recently begun to resurface. Athens remains a symbol of human potential, a place where thought, art, and politics first intertwined to define civilization. But its past also warns us. Progress without compassion is temporary. The measure of any society is not only in its achievements, but in how it treats those with the least power. Every civilization that followed Athens carried traces of its influence. Rome adopted its architecture and law. The Renaissance revived its art and philosophy. The Enlightenment used its ideas to shape modern democracy. Yet with each revival came a familiar pattern: admiration for Greece's brilliance and avoidance of its flaws. Artists painted its gods and heroes. Scholars quoted its philosophers. But few spoke about the cost of its progress. The silence that once shrouded the lives of the powerless continued through centuries of retelling. History remembered the thinkers, not the workers. The poets, not the people who sustained them. In many ways, this selective memory still exists today. Societies celebrate innovation and freedom while quietly ignoring those left behind. Technology advances faster than morality. Power collects in the hands of a few, and those without influence remain invisible, just as they were in ancient times. That's why re-examining the past matters. Ancient Greece is more than a story of marble and mythology. It's a mirror reflecting recurring human patterns. The drive for beauty, status, and progress often overshadows empathy and equality. Recognizing that pattern doesn't weaken admiration for the ancients, it deepens it. It reminds us that brilliance and blindness can coexist, and that learning from both is what makes true progress possible. In this light, Athens becomes not just a memory of greatness, but a warning, a reminder that even the most enlightened societies can lose their way when compassion is forgotten. When we look at the achievements of ancient Greece, we often see the origins of what we now call Western civilization: democracy, philosophy, art, and science. Yet, those same foundations reveal something else. Progress is never evenly shared. Athens built systems that celebrated freedom, but those systems were designed for a select few. Modern societies still wrestle with the same paradox. Technological growth, economic expansion, and cultural innovation bring immense opportunity, yet inequality continues to shadow every advance. Just as Athens prized its thinkers while overlooking its laborers, our world often values visibility over fairness. The tools may have changed, but the pattern remains recognizable. Education, for example, was once the privilege of the elite in Greece, used to define who was civilized. Today, while knowledge is more accessible than ever, barriers still exist, shaped by wealth, geography, and privilege. The ideal of shared wisdom remains unfinished, echoing the ambitions and failings of the past. Philosophically, Greece gave the world the language of ethics, the search for virtue, reason, and justice. But for all their brilliance, the thinkers of Athens often separated morality from empathy. Their lessons remind us that intelligence without compassion can easily become justification for inequality. If there's one enduring truth from the ancient world, it's that greatness without humanity is fragile. The statues of Athens still stand, but the people who built them are gone, their stories erased by time. Progress without inclusion is temporary. It lasts only as long as memory is selective. The true legacy of Greece lies not only in what it created, but in what it failed to protect: the dignity of every human life. In recent decades, archaeology and historical scholarship have shifted focus from the elites of Athens to the everyday people who lived beneath their shadow. Excavations around ancient neighborhoods, wells, and marketplaces have uncovered personal artifacts, simple tools, clay tablets, and bits of writing that reveal a quieter kind of history. These discoveries tell stories not of conquest or fame, but of endurance. They show how ordinary people kept their communities alive through small acts of resilience. A child's toy carved from bone, a letter written on a scrap of pottery, or the remains of a shared meal. All of these fragments tell us that the heart of civilization lies not in its rulers, but in its people. Historians now use these details to reimagine Athens as a living, breathing city, one that contained both brilliance and suffering. By studying what was once ignored, they have begun to give voice to those who were left out of the official record. This change in perspective reshapes not just how we view the past, but how we define progress itself. Modern readers often wonder how such an advanced society could overlook its own injustices. The answer lies in the comfort of habit. When inequality becomes familiar, it starts to feel normal. That illusion allowed Athens to flourish materially while decaying morally, and it is the same illusion that threatens every great society that forgets empathy in the pursuit of excellence. The power of studying these forgotten lives is that it forces us to see the cost of progress. It reminds us that history's greatness is not measured by what a civilization built, but by how it treated those who built it. Across history, empires have risen and fallen following a rhythm that feels almost predictable: vision, growth, excess, and decline. Athens was among the first to illustrate that pattern, but it was far from the last. The ambition that drove its citizens to build monuments and pursue knowledge also blinded them to the human cost of their achievements. This pattern repeats whenever progress outpaces empathy. The industrial age replaced marble with machinery, yet the distance between privilege and hardship remained. The digital era replaced scrolls with screens, but still struggles with fairness and equality. The tools evolve, the values are tested, and the same moral questions return in new forms. Ancient Greek thinkers often wrote about the concept of hubris, the dangerous pride that leads people or nations to overestimate their power. In tragedies performed on the Athenian stage, hubris was the flaw that brought even heroes to ruin. Those plays were meant as warnings. When success silences humility, downfall soon follows. Today, the same lesson echoes beyond history books. Whether in politics, technology, or economics, greatness without conscience eventually collapses under its own weight. Athens teaches us that wisdom is not the accumulation of knowledge, but the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Remembering those left unheard in ancient Greece is not about blame. It's about awareness. It shows that civilizations reach their peak not when they dominate others, but when they lift everyone together. The most advanced societies are those that pair invention with compassion, power with accountability, and pride with perspective. The ruins of Athens are not just remnants of stone. They are symbols of memory, silent witnesses to what humanity is capable of creating and of forgetting. Each broken pillar and eroded carving reminds us that even the greatest civilizations fade when they lose their moral balance. The lesson of Greece is not simply one of decline, but of repetition. Every generation inherits both the brilliance and the blindness of the one before. The brilliance is easy to admire. Greek philosophy shaped logic and ethics. Its theater introduced tragedy as a mirror for the soul. Its architecture still defines beauty and proportion. Yet behind that brilliance lies the silence of millions whose labor, sacrifice, and pain were excluded from the story. They built the foundations, but their names disappeared into the dust. Modern societies often repeat that same selective memory. We celebrate progress but overlook its cost. We build monuments to innovation while forgetting the people who make it possible. We praise freedom while tolerating inequity. In doing so, we create a new Athens, one of glass and steel, where the same moral dilemmas are merely disguised by modernity. The weight of memory is a responsibility. To study history honestly is to accept both its glory and its grief. Athens, for all its wisdom, struggled to see the humanity of those outside its circle. Today, the challenge is ours, to ensure that our pursuit of progress includes every voice. If we fail to remember that lesson, we risk building our own ruins before we even realize what we've lost. The people of ancient Greece believed that to forget one's past was to invite ruin. That belief still holds power. A society that remembers only its victories eventually forgets what made them possible. A society that hides its injustices cannot grow wiser, only older. The true strength of civilization lies not in the perfection of its art or laws, but in the courage to confront its contradictions. Athens once stood as the beacon of enlightenment. Today, it stands as a reminder that enlightenment without compassion eventually becomes darkness. When we look upon its ruins, we are not only looking at what once was, we are looking at ourselves. When people visit the Acropolis today, they often stand in awe beneath the Parthenon's towering columns. Sunlight washes over the marble, and for a moment, It feels eternal. Yet beneath that beauty lingers a deeper truth. Everything humanity builds carries its own shadow. Every triumph contains the seeds of a lesson waiting to be learned. The story of Athens is not frozen in the past. It echoes in modern life. Each generation repeats in its own way the same pursuit of greatness that once defined Greece. We strive for knowledge, prosperity, and recognition, but in that pursuit, we risk forgetting the quiet foundations of empathy and fairness that hold societies together. When success becomes the only measure of worth, people slip through the cracks of progress, just as they did millennia ago. Look at any age of innovation: the Industrial Revolution, the digital boom, the age of artificial intelligence, and you'll see reflections of Athens. Each brought discovery, but also inequality. Each expanded possibility, but tested compassion. History doesn't repeat to punish us. It repeats to remind us. The ancient stones of Greece still whisper that power without conscience is fragile, and intellect without kindness is hollow. Modern cities glitter brighter than the marble of Athens ever did, yet the same questions persist. Who benefits from our progress? Who remains unseen? The lessons of the ancient world become most powerful when they challenge us to reimagine justice, not simply admire the ruins of the past. Athens' true legacy lies not in its architecture or conquests, but in the timeless dialogue it started, a dialogue about what it means to be human. Every era adds its own voice to that conversation. If the Greeks taught us the value of reason, perhaps our task is to add compassion to that reasoning. If they gave us democracy, perhaps ours is to ensure that democracy finally belongs to everyone. The stones cannot speak, but we can. And if we listen closely to what they represent, the cost of brilliance, the consequence of silence, we might finally achieve what Athens once dreamed of: a society guided by both wisdom and empathy. The story of ancient Greece often begins with its heroes, its temples, and its philosophers. Yet the deeper truth lies not in the grandeur of its monuments, but in the complexity of its humanity. Athens was a city of brilliance and blindness, a place where people could debate the meaning of justice in the morning and overlook injustice by night. That contradiction defines more than an era. It defines the human condition itself. Every society builds its myths of perfection. For the Greeks, it was the idea of harmony between mind and body, logic and spirit. But harmony built on exclusion was never truly balance. It was a fragile illusion. The beauty of their statues, the grace of their theaters, and the precision of their laws were all born from a system that ignored the suffering of many to glorify the few. That truth doesn't diminish their legacy. It completes it. To study Athens honestly is to accept that progress and cruelty can coexist, that wisdom can flourish beside injustice, and that's what makes its story timeless. When we acknowledge both sides of history, the light and the shadow, we see ourselves more clearly. The ruins of Greece remind us that no civilization, no matter how advanced, is immune to moral decay when empathy fades. But there is hope in remembrance. Every generation that rediscovers these forgotten stories brings us closer to understanding what true civilization means. The legacy of Athens is not only in what it built, but in what it teaches us to rebuild: compassion, fairness, and awareness. The people once left voiceless now speak through the lessons they left behind. So the next time you see an image of the Parthenon or read the words of Plato, remember what lies beneath the marble and the myth. A lesson about who we are and who we could still become. History isn't just about what happened. It's about what we choose to learn. And that concludes our exploration of ancient Greece's untold realities, its brilliance, its contradictions, and the enduring lessons it offers today. If you found this journey thought-provoking, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories that uncover the hidden sides of history. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think modern societies can learn from ancient Athens? Your voice helps keep these stories alive. Because remembering the past isn't just an act of history, it's an act of humanity.